What is going on, everyone? If you are the Rewatch crew, welcome. I am so excited because we have a lot to cover. We are doing wholesaling part 2 today, and we are going to recap part 1. But before we do all of that, I have this community that I am starting. It is called Gratis. Gratis means grateful. And I started this community because I really wanted for you guys to be able to talk, to be able to kind of hold each other accountable, and to really be able to help each other out. So that is why if you see here, it says start here, and you can post your services on here. You can post whatever you would like. If you do anything that is non-business related, oh, I have a lot of members. More members than I thought. Okay. If it's non-business related, I will remove it, unfortunately, but that is just the name of the game. It will show you all of the upcoming events. I will need to update this. So that is everything. There is a course coming. If you do want to book a call, you can book a call here. There's an upcoming calendar. It does move around a little bit, only because I've been traveling for the last couple weeks, a week, and then I'll be traveling for the next week. If you want, there is a free Facebook group as well. So the internet is a little bit slow, it looks like. So there is a free Facebook group. You guys can post your deals here. That is the reason why I created it. So if you want, you could definitely post your reels, and you can also see me live right here. So I want to talk about wholesaling today, though. There is a lot of things that we have to get through. If you are rewatching this, you can't necessarily ask a question live, but you can leave it in the comments and I can answer your question if you have it. I really want you guys, oh, sorry, I have to share my screen here. I really want you guys to be able to ask questions and really learn from this, because that way you guys can implement it. And if you have any questions or you need help getting started, you can definitely message me on Instagram. It's Claire.The. Please message me. And if you're kind of stuck and you don't really know what to do, you can reach out. Okay, so wholesaling day 2. So I want to get kind of what we're going to talk about today, so you stay on the entire time. I am going to try to make sure that I try to keep this under 45 minutes, maybe an hour, depending how long I go. So wholesaling. So what we talked about in day 1, and it is so hot right now in where I'm at. So we talked about what is wholesaling. So wholesaling is basically taking a contract, an executed contract from the seller below market value. You bought a property below market value and you are flipping it to a buyer in the middle of escrow. And in the middle of escrow, you get a fee for wholesaling the property. We went through if it's illegal or not. So make sure you check on whether or not your state is legal or not to be able to do wholesaling. There are definitely pros and cons about wholesaling, right? It's definitely, it can be passive income, but it takes a long time to build up your business to get to that point. Or you trap yourself into kind of a job. So how do you get yourself to not be in a job is to understand how to scale wholesaling, or not just scale the wholesaling business, but how do you get into the actual passive income of owning rentals or becoming the bank. There's so many different types of real estate, commercial real estate. And I hope to talk about all of those on this channel because I believe it's necessary. So we talked about all that. We talked about finding a buyer first. But in this particular day 2 of this 2-part series, I don't know why it's not moving. We are going to talk about negotiations with the seller, what to say to the seller. We're going to talk about an executed contract, We're going to talk about non-refundable deposit, which we kind of spoke about yesterday. We're going to talk about filing a memorandum. I didn't know this until recently because there was a seller that backed out, and I'm like, how could I have protected myself in that situation? And a memorandum written into the contract will do that, and we're going to go through that process today. We're going to go through title escrow process, what you need to know as the wholesaler being in this business. What is a double close? A lot of people don't know what a double close is. And then you have finding a buyer first, pulling a motivated sellers. I don't think we're going to get to these, to be honest, today, right here, finding a buyer first, pulling. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're definitely going to get on how to run the numbers. That is on the list of things to do today. So we have a lot to get to. So let's dive right into it. The first thing is the negotiations with the seller. So a lot of people think that you can get on a call with the seller and, get it closed right away. And that typically is not the case. What typically happens is that you have to call them back a couple times because you have to work the numbers on it to make sure that it is a good deal and you're buying it under market value. Now, we are talking about, in this particular transaction, we're talking about straight cash offers. If this was creative financing, I would be talking about a completely different topic on how to negotiate with the seller. But in this scenario, it's going to be about buying under market value and giving people call it a low ball cash offer, right? That's what really you're doing. You are providing the seller with a offer where they can do a quick close on it and get them, squared away in less than, sometimes it's 10 days, sometimes it's 20 days. If you don't have a buyer lined up, I definitely would not do anything less than 30 days just to make sure that you have a buyer. But I wouldn't even put it in escrow like we talked about yesterday if there is no buyer on it. So the next thing is having, so what do you say to the seller? The first call is mainly just kind of building rapport with the seller. You want to ask specific questions. Now, the biggest thing on this first call that you want to figure out is the seller motivated? So a lot of the times people get on these calls. I'm not talking to a specific person. I know from experience and seeing other people call people and me myself calling people is that there is an experience where the seller is just not motivated to sell. Maybe you caught them on an off-market property and it's not listed with an agent, and you go in and you're thinking that they're motivated and you assume that they want to sell their property. Well, a lot of the times this is not the case. A lot of times they're not motivated to sell. Why would someone be motivated to sell? Well, there's a couple reasons. Number one is that they are motivated to sell because maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe they don't want to deal with the tenants, toilets, and termites. Right now, I'm dealing with a lot of sellers in the multifamily space, anywhere between 5 to 10 units. I think it's 5 to 20 units. Sorry, I'm adjusting myself. 5 to 20 units where they're not motivated. They're motivated because they don't want to, they're either retiring and they want to get rid of everything, which is crazy to me because you spent your whole career building this multifamily. You're supposed to retire on your real estate assets. That's beyond crazy to me. What I've been hearing a lot recently is that people are trying to get out of the multifamily space because they don't want to deal with the tenants. I had one guy say, I want to go back doing my roofing business. And I'm like, did I miss something? I thought the reason why you do real estate was to get out of your roofing business and so you don't work a labor job. But, to each their own. I don't, there's only so much that I know, right? But a lot of the time we do real estate in order to get out of our jobs and to not have to work so much, and we have time freedom. That's really what the game is about, right? So these are some questions that you can ask them to see if they're motivated. if they're like, hey, I don't need to sell, like, get me an offer. If it's for the right price, I'll do it. And a lot of the time you don't want to spend a whole lot of time with those people, because those you think that it's a deal, and then you come down to the nitty gritty and it's really not a deal because they're not motivated. People are motivated by divorce, death, tenants, tired landlords type of thing. Maybe their spouse doesn't want to deal with it anymore. There's so many different reasons, but they have to be motivated. I hope I belabored that point enough where they have to be a motivated seller. That's period, end of story. And the reason how you find their motivation is by asking questions. The person who is asking questions is the person who is in control of the conversation. All right, so you always want to be asking the question. So number one is, how long have you owned the property? Why are you selling the property? Are there any known issues with this property? Have you had any recent repairs or updates? Now, here is where number 4, you really have to ask this in a really interesting way, because it's still their property, and it's still, maybe they worked on the property and they have a little bit of an attachment to the property. So you can't just call their baby ugly, right? You have to say, hey, I just want to see if you have done any renovations, instead of saying, oh, I think that you didn't do, it. Is it not, like, just calling their baby ugly, meaning, is it not, oh, it hasn't been updated in X, Y, and Z? Like, you really have to be careful with the renovation one, because people will get offended and you can turn somebody off really quickly with that kind of stuff. The 5th one is the current condition of the roof, plumbing, electrical, and HVAC, right? Those are the really major problems with properties, is those 1, 2, 4 items. Those are the most expensive. So you want to make sure either they're in good working condition, or that they're going to take money off because they have issues. So can you provide any information on property taxes and utility costs? Also, another one is insurance. Insurance is going through the roof right now. It's going up 40%. So you really need to factor the insurance in your expenses. Number 7, what appliances or fixtures are included in the sale? That's significant. Why? Because I have purchased a property in California and then realized that the refrigerator does not come with the purchase. What am I doing? It depends what state you're at. Some places come with refrigerators, some do not. I don't know why that's such a crazy point there. I just think that's crazy. Are there any ongoing or planned assessments or homeowner association fees? You want to know all of the expenses. And here's what I've learned in my small amount of time I've been doing this. If you don't ask the question, the seller will say they will only give you the answers to the questions that you ask. So you have to ask the right questions in order to get the answers that you want. It's pretty, I know people are like, you would think that the seller gives you all the information up front, but that is definitely not the case. So your goal on this first one is just to get them to talk about their property. What can they tell you? And then you don't want to necessarily say a price on the first time around, because you don't really know until you go and you actually you go and run your numbers. You have to run your numbers. You have to run your comps. You have to run all of that stuff in order for you to make a sound decision on what your number is. And if they don't meet the number, then you need to keep it moving, because it's not worth it. You don't need to go out to the property. You don't need to set up an appointment. You just need to figure out what that number is. And once you get the number, then you can say, hey, this is the reason why. For the second call, the reason why I'm giving you this number is because The taxes are super high. The insurance is super high now. Everything is through the roof. You need a new roof. You might need new plumbing. All these things I have to take into consideration. However, what I do bring to the table is that you don't have to pay agent fees, and you don't have to pay. We can take care of, you can say we could take care of all your closing costs, but that's going to cost you 4% on the buying side. And then we can also close really quickly if you have a buyer lined up. So all those things play into a factor of getting that purchase price down to where you can then go take that and maybe put 10, 15, 20,000 and sell it to the end buyer. Okay, so negotiations with the seller is probably the most crucial. That's the only way that you're going to get any type of deals, is to be able to negotiate. If you're having trouble negotiating, you could definitely reach out to me and I'll definitely help you with that kind of stuff. I love negotiations. I live for negotiations. That's what I love to do. I don't necessarily like doing the initial call, but I like doing the second call and the third call and getting the property under contract. I think that is where my best skill set is used. And the reason for that is because I used to go business to business selling makeup out of the trunk of my car. So I'm not afraid to have those hard conversations. I'm also a business owner. So having those hard conversations is a very normal thing in business. So if you don't like confrontation or anything, business is going to be an interesting one, let me tell you. Confrontation meaning not necessarily like in someone's face, but having those conversations that aren't necessarily the most fun. That's what part of this whole thing is about. So a lot of people get nervous about, am I negotiating correctly, whatnot. If you guys have any issues with it, you can reach out to me. I do check my Instagram. So Claire and Investor, you can definitely reach out to me if you have any issues with any sellers getting started in this whole thing. If it's overwhelming, I get it. I've been there. It's super overwhelming. There's so much terminology. There's so many little things, little details. And the moment that you really don't understand it is like you get overwhelmed and you quit. And the reason why people quit is because they get confused. A confused mind quits. It's just kind of the name of the game. Okay. So I spoke about this yesterday, which is the non-refundable deposit from the buyer. So if now I have the seller, I have a contract with the seller, I purchase it under I have it under contract for a good number where I know I can make 10, 15, 20. I'm not going to get rich off of one deal, guys. So you got to remember that this is a business. And if you want to do wholesaling long term, or if you want to do any type of business long term, you consistently need leads. Leads is a huge factor in your business. I always say this, I said this yesterday, that if you don't have leads, you don't necessarily have a business, right? That's kind of how it works. Unfortunately, that is the name of the game. So, and then on the flip side, you need buyers. So you need somebody who is going to buy your property, and I would have that buyer lined up prior to you actually getting into escrow. And I went through a lot of that yesterday, so I don't want to really repeat myself, but a lot of that I put on the channel yesterday. So you can go and look at that. Okay, so you're in escrow, everything is going well, and then all of a sudden the seller gets maybe another offer that's higher, or they get cold feet and they don't want to sell it anymore. What are the repercussions? Number one is that you could get your earnest money deposit. They call it EMD in California. Your earnest money deposit you can get back, or if the seller is basically really being very frustrating, meaning like they're not wanting to go through with it, you can file something called a memorandum. And this is what you have to have when you're executing this contract and the filing of the memorandum needs to happen simultaneously, meaning it needs to happen together. So when you file a memorandum, even though maybe you have a memorandum filled out, until you record it, it doesn't really have any significance to it. So we're going to go to this tab that I have of what exactly a memorandum is, and I'm going to really break it down for you guys. A memorandum is legally binding agreement that is part of a real estate sales contract. It protects the buyer of a property who has a buyer accept their offer from being suddenly outbidded and losing out on the purchase of their home. This document will cloud a title. What does cloud a title mean? Cloud a title means that if someone were to go sell the property, they can't sell it without clearing the cloud on title. So if you guys ever watch a lot of YouTubers and they say, or even if you've listened to people like wholesalers or buyers, for instance, they're going to say, hey, as long as you give me clear title, everything's ready to go. I can close in 10 days. Okay, so they wait for the clearance of the title because they don't want IRS liens. They don't want any type of mechanics lien from a contractor, or maybe they have an outstanding debt that they have to pay. There's so many attachments that can go onto an actual property that if there is a cloud on title, it will show up on the title records. And you have to pay that lien before you can close. All right. The title company will not allow you to close the property unless the title is clear, because in order to get any type of title insurance for the property, you have to have clear title. So it's a double-edged sword. All right. So this document will cloud a title and prevent the seller from selling to another buyer. So you have to then go file it, meaning that you have to go actually record it for it to actually cloud the title. Having a memorandum of contract in place can also allow a buyer some leverage to be bought out. If a seller finds they want to sell to another buyer. The purpose of a memorandum of contract is to minimize the risk that a seller will back out of a real estate transaction after accepting an offer from the buyer. The seller has to go through with the transaction if they accept an offer for the buyer. Now, there is points where buyers don't perform, but that is not on the seller. If the seller decides to back out, you have to have a contract in place that states that you are able to put a lien on the property, and the seller has to actually abide by that as well. So a lot of people, they go through the whole transaction and the seller backs out and they don't really have any repercussions for the seller. This is how to do a repercussion for the seller. They also show you a sample contract. I like to make sure that this gets run through an attorney, state by state. All contracts are different. Each state is different with their contracts because each state has different rules and regulations that they abide by. It's always that one person that ruins it for everybody else. That's really how it is. Okay, so if you get into a situation where the seller wants to back out because they got a higher offer or they get cold feet or whatnot, you can file a memorandum. That is definitely possible. Okay. The next thing is title and escrow process. Now, this can get a little bit tricky, especially if the seller doesn't know that you have a buyer on the other end of it, and that is called a double closing. So what is a double closing? A double closing is that you have a contract with the seller stating that you have it for one price, let's say $300,000. Then you have another contract that states that you have a buyer that is buying the property for $350,000. So that means your fee is $50,000. You pass the closing costs to the seller and you pass the closing costs to the buyer. So you get a straight fee from the actual title escrow process. Now, if you do not want the seller to know how much of a wholesale fee that you are getting, you can do a double close. What is a double close? You close on the property. So you close, let's say you close on a Thursday. Within, it could be hours, it can be within 24 hours. Maybe you get some transactional funding for 24 hours. And then the next day it will close to the buyer and you get the fee. So the seller will never see that you purchased the property, that you sold the property for $350,000. They never see it. There are some states that this is frowned upon, so you definitely need to check with your title escrow officer to see if they even do it. Some states like California doesn't really do double closings, but I know in Texas they love double closings. So how do you get around it if you can't do a double closing? You really have to be transparent with the seller, saying, hey, I know you want this price. Because I helped you and did X, Y, and Z, I took a fee on top of your price that you didn't have to cut into their profits. You attached your fee to be able to go and sell it. So if you explain it correctly to a seller, they should be pretty understanding that you don't really work for free. If you find a buyer for them and they have their price and you found a buyer, you should be able to cut a fee from that. It's very, I mean, I hate saying that it's similar to being an agent, but it's very similar to that kind of stuff. Okay, so double closing we talked about, right? You are closing, you have a property is closing one day and within 24 hours, it's closing on the back end and you get paid that fee, and the buyer and seller, they don't really know about each other. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to try to keep this under 45 minutes. These can get long-winded for me. I know. And if I don't tell stories, you guys fall asleep. So wake up. So how to run the numbers. So we went through negotiations with the seller. We went through the non-refundable deposit. We went through the executed contract. We went through filing a memorandum. We went through the title escrow process, the double close, and then the last thing we're going to talk about today is how to run the numbers, because this is why I'm going to do this. This is why I go through running the numbers. There's one reason only. This is my one reason why. Because there is too many times that I get sent a deal from a wholesaler where their numbers are so far off that it's frustrating. And if you send me a second deal where the numbers are really far off, I don't even open the email anymore. I don't even open your message. I can't. It's too much. So the reason why I'm doing this, how to run the numbers, is because hopefully somebody who is brand new, getting started in this business, will see this and learn how to run the numbers. So then we can all do deals together and make money. Don't you all want to sing Kumbaya and make a lot of money and go and travel and not have to work? But it starts with understanding how to do real estate. And so what I always get for wholesalers is that I get a purchase price and I get rehab, and then I get an ARV, which is an after repair value of what it could be in the future, which is typically so far off because they don't take into consideration a lot of different factors when it comes to comparing real estate, It seems like a lot of wholesalers, and I'm putting you guys in a category, unfortunately, because that's kind of how I have seen in the last 7 years, is that they compare apples to oranges instead of apples to apples, okay? When you do any type of comparables, they need to be apples to apples, meaning that they have to be like-kind property. If they're not like-kind, and you send me something that is a mile away with 200, 300 square feet more, and it's on a bigger lot, and maybe it's by a school, and this one's not by a school, that's not apples to apples. And it's, $200,000 more, and it's in a completely different neighborhood. Yeah, that's a great comp for that neighborhood, but it's not necessarily a good comp for for this particular property. I know in Sacramento, you can be in $1 million neighborhood and then drive down the street and you're in a $200,000 neighborhood. So the area matters, and making sure that you have the right comp matters. All right. So you always want to get the purchase price. The purchase price is obviously, I usually do that the last thing. I'm trying to figure out the purchase price of what I would actually pay for this property if it was me purchasing it. Closing costs. Closing costs are going to run you 2%. Now, that's if the seller doesn't say, hey, you have to pay for my closing costs. Now, if the seller says you have to pay for it, that is going to up that closing cost to 4%. So to close a real estate transaction, title escrow is going to take their fees and their transfer fees out of that closing cost. The second thing is the rehab cost, right? Now, this could be, is it a lipstick on the pig, or meaning that is it just paint and carpet, or is it a full renovation? Because when I calculate the full cost of the rehab, if it's just a $10,000 to $20,000 rehab job, then I'm only looking at like a $10,000 to $20,000, maybe $30,000 in profit. If I do a rehab job that's $100,000, for instance, I like to make $100,000. Why? Because guess what? Contractors are never on time and they are never on budget. That's just the way the name of the game works. So if I'm going to have a huge rehab, then I need a big profit margin, because there are stuff that's going to go sideways. So you also have to take in consideration what the end buyer is going to do with this property. What is the end buyer going to fix and flip it? So now you have agent costs, you have selling costs, that all plays into a factor. And then what happens if the person is just going to keep it as a rental? Is it going to be good as a rental property, and can they get their money that they want, right? So if it's a $150,000 property and you can rent it out for $1,000, are they going to be able to cash flow on it? So there's so many different factors when you're talking about running the numbers. So how you run the numbers is important. Who's the end buyer? So if I'm doing a single family house and I'm trying to flip it to a flipper, there's a lot of costs involved, right? I have closing costs, I have a rehab, a cost of money. So if it's not cash, they're paying 4 points and 10% on their money, right? Because they're going through a hard money lender. Maybe they have to maybe they have to borrow private capital. That money cost is significant. So if they're 6 months down the line with the cost of money, that could be $10,000, that could be $20,000 of their own expense. Selling costs. Selling costs is not necessarily closing costs. This is when you're done with the rehab and you go and sell the property. So when you go and sell the property, that's another 2%. Right? And then agent costs is anywhere between 5 to 6% of the sale. So every single time you transfer the property, you're looking at 11%. So you're looking at 11% at the purchase price. And then you're looking, if you flip it to an end buyer, you're looking at another 11% of everything. Oh, sorry, this is supposed to be selling cars. It's typically 11%. And when I say 11, I meant like 4, 6, and there's also unexpected costs that typically come up as well. So you're looking at anywhere between 8 to 11% to actually transfer the property during escrow. So everything costs money. And then you also have to factor in the profit, and then you get the purchase price, right? So you go ARV. So say the ARV, let's just do 400. And you're looking to make a $50,000 profit as the flipper at the other end. And then you also have to put your wholesale fee in there. We can't forget about actually getting paid on this transaction. We cannot forget about that one. So you're looking at another 20, let's just say 10,000. You can do more, you can do less, depending on what the purchase price comes out and if you can negotiate it down with the seller. Let's just say rehab is a light rehab, so 25,000. Everything is so freaking expensive nowadays. Cost of money is probably one of your bigger expenses. So let's say another $20,000. So if I factor all those costs in, let's see, let's run the numbers. 400. So let's say I'm getting this property for $275, which probably doesn't make any sense. Actually, you probably need to get it cheaper than that. So, oops. So the cost of this is 2 times that by 2% closing costs, which is, so this is, to purchase it, I have to shell out another $4,500. Rehab. So now I got to add all this stuff up. So let's see. Selling costs of 400 is, so there's more than just a purchase price, rehab, and an ARV. Okay, there's a lot more to this. That's why when someone just gives me 3 numbers, I'm like, where's the rest of it? Okay, so then this is another 24,000. Okay, so let's add all this up. 45 plus 25 plus 20 plus 8 plus 24 plus, I'm trying to make a $50,000 profit. So the spread on this has to be around 140,000. So what is 400,000 minus 141? So I have to buy this property for a minimum of $259,000, but that doesn't leave me a whole lot of room. So I'm trying to get it probably down another 25,000. Right? So that is really how you calculate it. There's so many more factors to it. So a lot of the time it needs, you know, a 6-figure spread. I've gotten so many properties where it's like, it's 200,000, it's worth 300, and it needs 75,000 in rehab, but you're going to make $25,000. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be paying out money at the end of that because there's so many different costs to all of it. Now, I'm just talking this particular situation. This is for me to do an all cash offer as a single family house. This is not having anything to do with multifamily. And this is if the end buyer is a flipper. So this is so specific to that. There's ways to crunch the numbers as a subject to property. There's ways to crunch the numbers as a contract for deed, as seller financing. It's all different. All right. To run the numbers as a rental market, all of that is very different. So that is how you actually run the numbers. I've seen a lot of people do some weird things with the numbers. Finding the ARV is the most important to make sure that you understand where to find the ARV. That is extremely important, let me tell you. So this is all I have for you guys today. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit on the shorter side, even though I still went 40 minutes, but that is okay. So one last thing is this gratis. If you are interested in joining, it is free. All you have to do is create a profile, and you can start chatting and putting kind of what you're looking for. Like, hey, I'm a new investor trying to get started, and I'm looking to kind of have an accountability partner, or I'm looking to just see what other people have to offer, or I'm looking for somebody local in my market. So this is where that all happens. So thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you get notified every single time that I go live. I will be going live Monday and Tuesday next week. I have a regular schedule now that I am kind of back in the swing of things. I kind of took a little bit of time off to see my family, and now I am back. All right. Well, thank you guys. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon. Bye.